Morning, everybody. We're going to get going with this track here. I just want to start with reminding everyone, checkout is at noon. You can check with the front desk. They will be storing luggage and bags and all of that for the remainder of the day for you if you need it. So this track is it's talking about NSClient and what's new with Michael Medin here. So, Michael.
That should work. Does people hear me? Awesome. Now I can hear myself. That's kind of scary. Seriously. Oh, I'll have to survive, I guess. Oh. Anyway, my name is Michael Medin. I'm here to talk a little bit about Windows monitoring, a little bit about NSClient++, which to me is sort of the same, since that's how I do my Windows monitoring, which is to say not much. Anyway, first off, quick disclaimer. Since I'm in the US, I guess you guys are aware of these kind of things. This is like the morning and everyone is hungover, I've sort of summarized it a bit. So essentially it's not their fault and it's definitely not my fault. So it has to be your fault, right? So that's sort of the short version of the disclaimer. My background is probably a bit different than most people here, since I'm not a system manager. I don't use Nagios. To be quite honest, I don't even like Nagios. Probably shouldn't say that. I'll not be invited back. But that's the truth of it. Instead, I do development for my spare time and in my work as well. So that's really my sort of angle into this. I accidentally ended up at a network operations center for the company I was working for because the Unix guy quit. And I knew Unix, so I was the perfect guy to replace him because he was doing all the router configurations and firewalls and that kind of stuff, and I knew nothing about it. But I'm a quick study. So I managed to get on board. And they were using Big Brother, which I also hated more than Nagios. And we sort of started to migrate to Nagios. And since there was no real good Windows agent at the time, I started NSClient++, which is sort of at the time a drop-in replacement for the like p-NSClient thing that was before. And we figured that p-NSClient was kind of crappy because it didn't work very well. And nrp-nt was too much work because you had to distribute all the scripts and all that kind of stuff. So we tried to find some sort of hybrid ground. Around 2004, I stopped at a network operations center and got back to development work, which was more fun. And then I just open sourced it and didn't really care for it much. Around 2007, people were asking me a lot of questions, reminding me that there were a lot of bugs and that kind of stuff. So I started to actually develop it again, and since then it has been quite actively developed for the last few years. 039 was out in May this year, and 040 will hopefully be out this year. You can get it nightly build. 040 is a quite big leap, which we'll know a bit later on. So, skipping myself, going into the actual presentation, the agenda. A quick introduction to Windows monitoring, the options out there, and sort of how to use NSClient++ if you would like to do that. Then I'll talk about what's new in 039, which was the sort of new stable version we have out. And then I'll talk about what's coming in the 040 version, which hopefully, as I said, will be out this year. And then I'll tell you why this will be the end of NSClient++, just to have a little cliffhanger here at the beginning, so you'll stay listening. And then there might actually be questions at the end, we'll see. So, quick introduction. So what is NSClient, which is how people tend to refer to this? And it's generally a very old program, actually. So NSClient++ is not really NSClient, but that's really the domain I have now and the name I often use because the ++ causes havoc when you want to type things on the command prompt and that kind of stuff. It's also an old protocol used by the check-nt command, which unfortunately a lot of people still using. Don't, it's crap. Use nrp or, well, something else anyway. And it's also a concept, which is usually analogous with like Windows monitoring. And NSClient++ is not really anything of this. It was originally written as a drop-in replacement for the p-NSClient, which was used back in 2000-something. But it has evolved quite a lot since then. So a better comparison now would be NRPE and NSCA and not check-nt. So what do we have more? Yeah. Why should you use NSClient++, or what options do you have? sort of like classic thing is, of course, SNMP, which on Windows is not very good. If you're running HP or something like that, they usually have agents you can install, which have a lot of SNMP options, so you can monitor it with that. But if you buy your servers from someone else, or if you buy servers from a lot of different companies, you will not be very successful with SNMP on Windows. There are third-party SNMP things you can buy and install, but that's not really the way I would go. Then there is a ton of different agents out there. A lot of them are abandonware and old and outdated. But they all sort of fit the bill and do something. Agentless VMI is something that is quite popular right now. And for me, the big problem is that it sort of enforces a centralized monitoring, and it also doesn't allow you to do passive monitoring and that kind of stuff. So for me, it's a bit of a, the drawback sort of overhangs the positive sides of the agentless. NSClient++, of course, is sort of the freedom, and that's usually why people use Nagios, because they can write their own script, they can change things, they can do all of this stuff. If you didn't like that, you would probably be using some sort of big branded solution which has all this out of the box. And that's really what NSClient++ brings, because you can do anything with it, much in the same way that you can do with your Unix monitoring. But then again, I'm the author of one of the options I'm talking about, so you might want to take my word for it. There's also several protocols when you're monitoring Windows. Of course, we have the NSClient protocol used by the check-NT command. We have NRPE, we have NSCA. I am currently implementing NRDP and NSCP and DNSCP, and there will eventually be check-MK support as well, which means that you can pretty much do anything you want, giving you with the nice option of having to pick one of them, which is not that easy. This is sort of a rundown of the drawbacks of the various options, and NSClient is, as you can see, a lot of red and yellow, same for NRP and NSCA. I've, for the past, 3, 4, 5 years, been trying to get Ethan, or at least the Nagios community, to adopt a new replacement protocol for NRP and NSCA. We have now the NRDP, but that's just a replacement for NSCA and not NRPE, which I think is a bit of a drawback. So that's why I've sort of developed the thing down here, which is called NSCP, which is the way I think a protocol should be implemented. Of course, it's all green, right? Yeah, it's awesome because I did it. Or it could be that because it was I who did the slide, right? But you never know. The main difference with NSCP, first of all, it's very unstable. So it's something I wrote last week or a couple of weeks ago. So it's nothing I would really use now. But the main sort of difference is that it's not about distributing, NRPE checks. It's about distributing everything. So you can send your scripts down to your client if you want. You can send configuration down. You can grab configuration from a central server. So it's generally sort of do everything. It's also built on Google Protocol Buffers, which is a bit like XML without the drawback. So the idea is that you should be able to tunnel it over HTTP, and there will be like a support for XML and REST and that kind of stuff. So the idea is that it should be a protocol working for whatever you want to do. But the problem is it's my protocol, so probably no one will use it, but I will use it, so that's fine with me. Then we have this one, which is something I'm sort of playing around with for fun. That's a message queue-based version, which means that you can have fault tolerance or load balancing and fan in, fan out, and all that kind of stuff. It's built on 0MQ, which means that everything theoretically just works. So you can set up a whole network infrastructure, everything, and you just push. And if one server goes down, the other one picks up, and all that kind of stuff. But as I said, that's more for fun. If anyone is interested in it, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just develop it when I think it's fun and not. Also check MK, sorry. That's something which is, to me, a bit different. So I will probably implement it because Matthias asked me to do it. But I'm not really a big fan of it because it doesn't really allow you to do that many things. It's more about dumping data across the channel, which means that you have to somehow configure which data to dump. But we'll see. It will come eventually. Probably not in 0.40. All the yellow ones will be in 0.40. The green ones has been in 0.3. Well, all of them back for several years. So what is NSClient++? If you look at it, well, it's written in C++. It's around 75,000 lines of code. It's actively developed. The problem is just by me. So that means that if I'm bored, there is no development. And that means that whenever you want support and I'm bored, there is no support either. It also has a very modular design philosophy, which I think is a good thing. Many people think it's a bad thing because that means that you actually need to know what you're doing, because out of the box it will not do anything. But that's again, I think, why I like Nagios, because you can do anything with it. Also why I dislike Nagios, and same with NSClient++, you can do anything with it. Because then you all of a sudden need to know how to do that anything to be able to do it. It runs on pretty much anything called Windows, and as you can see on the nice little line here, as well as Linux and Debian, or Debian and Ubuntu are the machines I'm building it on as well. This is new for 0.40. Most features will require NRP, NSCA, or some of the advanced protocols, so if you're using check-anti, please stop. It's not a good solution. The documentation is, of course, a wiki, and that means that when you think the documentation sucks, it's, again, your fault because you haven't written it. So don't blame me. That's the point of the wiki. So outsource the documentation to the user community. Unfortunately, there is no user community. There are just users, so that means that I outsource the documentation to me, which doesn't work at all. It's not supported by commercial entities, so of course sponsoring and donations are welcome. It is used by a lot of people, I think. I don't really know, to be honest. There are some like download figures, but it's kind of difficult to know if there's one guy downloading it 4,000 times because it doesn't work, or if there's 4,000 people downloading it because it's awesome. I generally go for the first option, but we'll see. And please help out, add documentation, report problems, tell me what you would like to have or not like to have, and please tell me if something is bad, because then I can fix it. So I think that's sort of the end of the NSClient++ introduction, or Windows introduction part. And these are, by the way, the sponsors. So a big thank you to them. OP5 is, I think they're here. They were not here maybe, but at the conference. Swedish company, OpsView and Worth Phoenix, all of them have like packaged Nagios, well, all four of them actually have packaged Nagios products. So you can buy Nagios from them if you feel like you don't want to steal it or use it for free. Oh, sorry, I was going to tell you how to use NSClient++ as well. Completely forgot, that's me for you. It is a command line program. It is, in that regard, very different from all other Windows programs because there's no clickety-clickety thing. It's a command line. And a lot of Windows people think that's hard. I think it's nice, so that's the way it is. Also, when you do testing and when you have problems, please start by using the NSClient++ -test command, and then run it from check NRP, and then add it to Nagios. A lot of people do this the other way around, which means that they sort of change the Nagios, they reload Nagios, they wait for 5 minutes, and then they get nothing back. So they change something, they reload Nagios, wait for 5 minutes, and they get nothing back. And then once they've done that for like a day, they come to me and they say, it's crap, it doesn't work. And then I say, please test this. And about half of them come back and say, oh, thank you. And the other half, they never come back. So I think they sort of discovered that, oh, I was just stupid, and yeah, so they fixed it for themselves. It also works with non-Nagios-based systems. So it's not strictly a Nagios thing. And please, NSClient++ -test is your friend, so use it. Then we have, this slide, which is the 0.40 version, because it's a new version, right? It has to have a completely new command line syntax. So I've renamed the binary, just for spite. Mainly it's because when you do, on Windows, when you do NSC and you do tab, you get like quotes around because there's a plus sign, and it really annoys me. So now I remove the plus and put a P instead. And of course, there's 2 dashes instead of 1. That's like twice the awesomeness, So this is the way it will work. It's sort of the same, it's just slightly different. One important thing is that the first option is magical, because the first option has to be first. The other ones doesn't really matter. But the first option will sort of dictate which module to load, and which will then correspond to the rest of the options. Do you want me to wait while you take a picture? Or should I switch slide? Okay, so I can switch now, good. And again, NSCP --test is your friend if you're using the 0.40 version. So 0.39, what's new? 0.39 is generally a sort of like a maintenance version, which means that I've spent 6 months writing a lot of new stuff which doesn't work. There are no really bug fixed version because that's boring. The main thing is that I've redone the file-related stuff, so the check file commands are sort of changed around a bit. It means that the disk checks actually work this time. I promised volume support for like 4 versions, and never really managed to get it working. I don't have any volumes myself, so I just sort of implemented the API the first time, and someone said it didn't work, so I sort of tried it once, but it didn't really work then either. But now it works. I've tried it once. We have a lot of aliases, which is my sort of final push to try to get people off check-NT, because then it's almost like check-NT, because you can do nrp check CPU, and you don't have to add all the 14 command line options, which you would normally need to do. There is some arbitrary stuff. Crash handling is the cool stuff, if you ask me. We'll get a bit into the details later on. Scheduled task has been rewritten. There is no backwards compatibility, but then again, there were no documentation at all for the previous one, so probably no one ever used it, I hope. If you did, you're out of luck, because it's the new syntax. Nothing of the old code remains. So, the first thing, though, is that we have a new team member, and it's a girl, actually. You wouldn't believe it by being at this conference. Unfortunately, though, she is pretty much wet behind her ears, so essentially, 1.5 years and nothing. It's like not even a single one-liner in Perl. Seriously, something is wrong. But I'm working on it. I bought a shitload of Lego, which I'm going to bring home, and hopefully in a year, at least a one-liner. The other thing is, of course, the check file. And we had the check file 1 command and then the check file 2 command. And I figured that check file 3 is kind of quaint, so I have check files with a plural S on it. Is much cooler. So that's what it's called. And normally, when I did this for check event log before, I used to have like 15, 20 slides trying to explain how to work. And then I came up with this new SQL-based syntax, which I thought was awesome. So I used to say that it's like a powerful interface, simple to use, and yada, yada, yada. And then I was sitting at the bar. It was like, not actually yesterday, it was the day before yesterday. And I was like, no, it's too difficult. So now I'm back to, okay, it's crap again, and how to figure out something new. But I think it's good, though. But please let me know what you would think to be simple, because I thought it was like dead simple. But alas, not so. It works on like SQL where clauses, which means that you can create arbitrary expressions doing pretty much anything. Which is why I thought it was awesome, but apparently not then. So it should be fairly simple to sort of do things. One thing which a lot of people find difficult is this guy, the dates. And I won't go into the details, but essentially it should look like that, not any other way. So if you write anything else, you're doing it wrong. A couple of options. I won't go into the details. They're kind of self-explanatory. The red ones are, of course, slow. If you were to count the lines of all your files in your hard drive, it will take a while. So use them at appropriate places and not as your one and only filter. There is, of course, a lot of like operators. Sorry, since it's can do comparison and stuff. Nothing strange. Regular expression is new for 039. Like is substring matching, so it's not like in SQL where you have like a percentage sign. So essentially, it's just substring matching. Options, the important ones is truncate, because otherwise you'll get too much data and you will fill up the NRP buffer and it won't work. This will be deprecated in 040, by the way. I would have expected applause there, but no. That means that no one is using it. It should have been deprecated like 12 versions ago, because it's just me being lazy, but I am lazy. Also, the debug equals true option can be good if you're not getting the check results you're expecting, because if you're then running in test mode, it will tell you stuff on the console that it's doing. If you're running things from Nagios, it won't tell you shit, and you have no idea why it's not working. But we've already been through there. A couple of other things. I stole the check mkey magic thing. And by stole, I mean I just copied his Python code, sort of translated it to C and dropped it in. So I have no idea what it's doing. So if you're using check mkey magic thing, try to see if this does the same. And if it doesn't, please let me know what it should do, and I can try to implement that. There was like weird maths and stuff, and I don't understand math, so yeah. Couple of options. Yeah, I had like the trial version of Office 2010, and that they have this weird Q drive which is unreadable, and I got annoyed, so I had an option for that. Check volumes, as I said, actually works. So all you do is check all equals volumes, and it will check the volumes instead of the drives. Scheduled tasks. It's the same as all the like the check event log, check files, and that kind of stuff. So it's a SQL where clauses again. There's 2 modules for it, and that's because Microsoft is brain dead, stupid. They have 2 APIs which are completely different. And if you create tasks with one API, they're visible in one API, and if you create them in the other API, they are visible in the other API. But essentially, what you should do is, if you're using Windows Vista, you should use the check task schedule 2 module. If you're using something older, you should use the task schedule module. The old one, or the check task schedule.dll, will still work on Vista, but it will only see half the tasks. Couple of options, I won't go into them. Nothing really interesting. A couple of examples, I probably won't go into them as well, unless someone is very interested. I'm not. Aliases, as I said, is there like a whole bunch of them? I won't really go into them, but you have like alias CPU, alias memory, alias. It's sort of the same that you have for check NT. There's a couple of other ones which you don't have. For instance, alias volumes, you don't have with that one. Then we have stuff like task schedule. They are actually kind of neat. They're OP5, sort of. I stole them from OP5. Actually, they didn't donate them, so probably some sort of copyright issue there, but I don't bother about it. Alias updates for checking updates. What do we have more? Yeah, services. This is new as well. You can check if processes are hang. That means if they are not responding, which can be neat if you have like applications that doesn't work. If you're using NSClient++, everything works, so you don't really have that problem. But other people, I hear, write buggy software, and then it might be good for you. Crash handling, yeah, it's, as I said, you don't really need this because it doesn't crash as often. But the idea is that if it crashes, you can at least tell me why it crashed, and I can figure out and fix it. And this is actually really awesome, because when I just threw this into nightly beta, I started getting crash dumps. So I started looking at it and thought, cool, and I fixed the bug just by having a crash dump. So it actually works. So please, if you have any issues, send me the crash dump, and I can actually fix it for you. So this is the cool stuff, if you ask me. It's based on the Google CrashPad, or is it BreakPad? BreakPad, sorry, which is the same thing that Mozilla uses, or Google Chrome and that kind of stuff. So it's a fairly straightforward solution. And you can, of course, configure it. There are 3 options. You can either restart the service, or you can either or restart the service. You can submit the dump, or you can archive the dump. Default is to restart the service and archive the dump, not submit it, because I'm sort of scared of the internet and figured people might be mad at me if they started calling home. Yeah, there is, of course, some weird stuff. NSCA, for instance, is fixed when you have sending a lot of payloads. NRP supports the Ton patch for large payloads, so you can sort of have a lot of stuff coming back. This is kind of a big one, check NSCP. That's probably the first one I should have implemented. It checks if something is wrong with NSCP. So essentially, it's grabbing the error log or any crash dumps and reports status back based on that. All the filters have a lot of new stuff. For instance, regular expression support and that kind of stuff. Yeah, hung support I already mentioned. Yeah, there was some intermittent missing performance data, which has been fixed. That was pretty difficult to track down, actually. So that's sort of the end of the 0.3.9 version. And I have no idea how I'm doing time, actually. I'm doing very good on time. That's bad. I should have stayed longer on this deck. Hopefully we'll manage anyway. So this is sort of a nice little cool graph thingy, trying to make it all look professional. The idea, though, is that there should be like a step between each version, so I can come up with a bug fix version. Something it's kind of difficult now because I have the same versions allocated. So in general, 0.4.0 will be followed by 0.4.2, unless there is bugs. Then there will be an 0.4.1 as well. So if you want to go for like the stable version, then you probably want to go for the 0.4.1 and 0.4.3, and not the 0.4.0 and 0.4.2. That's the idea, anyway. These are some of the stuff that's coming in the respective versions. I'll go into that in details in the next few slides. So let's move on to the next few slides instead. So 0.4.0, that's something I've been working on for, I think, like 5 years now. And the main reason why it's taking 5 years is because I did this awesome, cool stuff, change everything. And then I developed some things on the 0.3x version, and I had to spend like 4 months porting those changes back. And by that time, I developed, a shitload of new stuff, released a new version, and I spent a couple of months porting that back. So essentially, I never caught up, but that's been fixed now. So hopefully, it should just work from now on, and 0.4.0 will be released soon. The main new thing is that there is a new core, which I refer to as, and that's essentially everything has been rewritten. There is Unix support, of course, which is, I think, kind of neat. And there is a new settings subsystem, which means that it will actually use the registry in a more registry-ish fashion, because it's like hierarchical structure and not just a flat file. There is, as I said, a new protocol. Supports a lot of stuff in distributed monitoring area. And we have an updated installer and Python scripting, which I also think is kind of neat. If we look at 042, the thing I'm sort of planning is to have something I sort of call monitoring kits. And the idea is to try to get away from that there's 14 different ways to do this, and I don't really know what they do, and instead have a check SQL server, which can go to your SQL server, figure out what needs to be checked, and then check it for you to make it a lot more easier to use. That's the idea. We'll see if that's the end result. Knowing me, it probably won't be. It will be very difficult and arcane to use, but we'll see. The idea is that it should be simple. I will also rewrite the check subsystem to use all the modern stuff, which means that it will not support NT4. I don't know if people are actually using it on NT4. I get some feedback from people who are like, yeah, awesome, it works on NT4. And I don't know if that's because they think it's awesome that it works on NT4, it's because they needed it on NT4. I will probably have like the old check system module available if you want to run it on NT4, but the new one will be based on modern Windows. I will also do .NET plugin support. I've been talking about this for quite some time, but I don't really program .NET myself, so I've never gotten around to it. And a metrics cache with aggregation support. This is something I've been trying to push for quite some time. If you want to monitor your environment, the CPU threshold or the CPU metrics is not interesting at all. High CPU is the best thing ever because then you've actually gotten something for your money. If you bought a shitload of server with 0 CPU, sell them. Use the servers. But the thing is, so what should you monitor then? Well, if you have high CPU load and no transactions, that's bad. So it's really the combination which is something you should be monitoring. At least if you want your business to be happy because they want their business process to run. They don't care about the web server or the DNS server or whatever. Their interest is my business server working? Yes. And if the DNS is working and the web server is working, it doesn't mean that the business server is working because the business server is doing a lot of stuff inside which you probably do not monitor. So that's sort of the idea. And generally in my field, that's called CEP or complex event processing or like stream processing or something like that. We'll see if I get that far, but the idea is something I've been wanting myself, so I'm going to try for it anyway. What do we have next? Yes, these are some things that might be coming if someone wants it. For instance, instead of doing max critical, max warn, that kind of stuff, maybe this would be neat to have like warn any drive about 90% or C drive about 80% or something like that to make it easier to have an expression to write your warning and critical thresholds in. Remote updates or upgrade, that's something I don't use myself, but some people I hear like it. Pretty much every other application I use has it nowadays, so I feel a bit left out. Port of the standard plugins. Some people want to have like check TCP or check HTTP and that kind of stuff running from Windows. I've been trying to get the plugin community to port their plugins, but they're not very keen on that. So one option would be to do it myself, but I'm not too keen on that either. Unix plugins might be an option as well. And the client web interface. The system tray is, by the way, removed in the 040 version. So if you like system trays, too bad. Then please request it and I might add it back. I never liked it myself. But essentially, please let me know what you would like and I'll try to implement it. So if there is something you would like, please let me know. Then we have the brand new core, right? And I've been talking about this a bit, and I actually have a picture for you to show what it is. And it's the flux capacitor, right? Yeah. This is a bit of an inside joke because we were talking about the bar the other night, and none of the other ones put the flux capacitor in the presentation, so I just had to. But essentially, it's everything in the internals has been rewritten using a lot of standard libraries. This means hopefully that things should just work. I mean, for instance, a lot of people, they had issues with the socket because they were like, yeah, we have 12 interfaces. The first 3 are disabled, and we want to use the 4th one and the 8th one. I was like, okay, I have no idea how to do that. But the beauty of using a library is that some others, a smart guy has actually figured that out, and it just works. But we'll just see. Probably there will be a lot of new bugs because there is a lot of new code. And that's sort of the scary part for me because it could be that it goes from being fairly stable to being crap. I hope not. I've been using it myself for the past 6 months, and it seems fairly stable for me, actually. So hopefully it won't be a lot of new bugs, but we'll see. This is, I think, the biggest news. A lot of people are probably asking this question. It's a fair question. Pretty fair, actually. And there's sort of two answers. The first one is the slightly, amusing one, which is, I've been trying for years to get more people involved in developing NSClient++, and no one is interested. So I figured, if I take NSClient+ and bring it to the Unix guys, maybe they will be interested. So we'll see. Most likely they won't, and I'll have done this for not. But the other reason is, of course, because it's now built on Boost, which is a platform-independent library. It's built on Google Protocol Buffer, which is a platform-independent library, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can build it on Linux, so there's no reason not to do it. It will probably, though, not be supported. And that's mainly because I'm not a Linux programmer, so there's like a shitload of stuff which I won't do out of the box. And if someone want to step up and do that, that's fine with me, and I'll be happy to implement it. But it's not something I will be spending time on. But it will, or it does already run on Linux, and I'm using it on Linux myself, so it works for me. New settings subsystem is another big change, which you might be asking yourself why. I like to change things because it makes it fun for me and not fun for you. But that's not my problem. Feel free to start your own product, which I will be using, and then you can get back at me, or you'll have to live with it. The main reason, though, is that the number of options were sort of exploding, especially in the 0.4.0 version, when you can tweak and tune a lot of stuff. And when you have like the ability to load multiple NRP servers and that kind of stuff, then it becomes very difficult to just have a flat setting structure. So essentially what we have now is /settings/NRP/server instead of as before when we had NRP server. And the beauty of this is, sorry, we'll skip a slide ahead. The beauty of this is, of course, if you load 2 plugins, then you can just configure them in the same way with a different sort of middle name there. But we'll see if people like this or not, but that's the way it is anyway. Another good thing is that settings have URLs, and notice the very big citation marks around URLs, because they're not, it just looks like it. But the idea is that you don't really have to say, I want to use ini files. You can use anything. So you can start out with an ini file, which goes to the web and downloads another ini file, which then uses a Python script, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can create really complex structures, which will cause endless loops and crash and that kind of stuff, if you so inclined. And at some point, there will probably be a way to load Python scripts and Lua scripts, which means that you can create your sort of configuration on the fly. You can't technically do that right now by using a Python script which changes the configuration, because there's internal APIs for that, but eventually there will be something along this line as well. And as I said, you can mix and match, which I think is good if you have like large installations, because then you can sort of have a small subset which you start from, and then you can go to the web or something and grab the actual configuration you want to use, and then have central configuration distribution without having to do too much yourself. Yeah, I sort of talked about this, so we'll skip it again. And do you need to change? Well, all of you check NT people out there, no, you will not notice this at all. But hopefully there are no check NT people out there, and then probably. If you're using NSCA, you might actually not have to change, because I have some weird stuff that sort of makes it look the same. But if you want to use any of the new features, you will have to change, yes. But it's fairly easy to do so, because it can migrate between the settings subsystems, so you can sort of change back and forth as much as you want by using the command line switches. Yeah, new protocol. This is sort of the classical thing people are doing when they're using NRP checks, which means that first of all, Nagios have to fork, and then I have to fork to handle the request, and then I have to fork to actually run checks for you, and then you have your firewall doing some stuff in between. And it seemed kind of silly to do this, because essentially all you want to do is this, right? And that was sort of the main driving point, that why do I have to call NRP 25 times because I want to check 25 metrics? There are some people who do this with, for instance, check multi and that kind of stuff, but I think it should be built into the protocol. So that is a feature of the protocol, but and sort of the main driving force behind it. Of course, the other thing is that the NRP protocol does not support locales, which means that all the people in non-Sweden and non-US have issues because they have characters which are not compatible. and a lot of other problems. The whole buffer length thing is something I really hate about NRP. That's just, don't want to be mean to anyone, but it's not a good idea. So that was sort of the driving point, or the driving points. So as I said, allows more commands to be sent. It can be used, or it is used internally between the plugins communication, which means that there is no buffer limits anywhere internally in NSClient++. Even if you're using NRP, then the only buffer limit is the NRP agent. It supports both passive and active checks. It supports configuration and management, that kind of stuff. And it's extensible, which means that if you want to do whatever, you can sort of shoehorn that into the protocol and send along whatever you want. And as I said, it will support multiple locales, unlimited payloads, and real performance data, which means that they're not strings, they're actually performance data. So, distributed monitoring. This is something that sort of comes from the protocol and the internals. And I've been sort of trying to figure out what this actually is. This is sort of the evolution. And first of all, I had the NSCA stuff going on here, which called a lot of commands and then submitted them to the NSCA server. This is sort of how NSCA works in NSClient++. Then I sort of figured, yeah, let's change this and put an event broker in here, which means that there's a scheduler which runs commands, then plugs them to an event broker, and then you send that along to your NSCA server. Sort of the same. But then you can do other stuff with the same stuff. So for instance, if you have a real-time plugin, you can just forward the data, which means that if I have an NSCA server here, I can act as a proxy and just forward stuff. But that also means that if I have another protocol here, I can sort of switch between protocols, and I can do some weird stuff. It also has support for routing, a lot of weird stuff as well as that. But the main idea is that sort of the protocols should be, or it should be protocol agnostic, meaning that if you want to use something else, you can. A couple of other things, of course, you want to do check multi the old school way. You can easily write your own sort of NRP scripts, which runs the commands, submits them back through NSCA. Or this is something which I think is kind of neat. I mean, if you have check event log, then you could have a syslog agent and just forward that to your syslog agent, meaning you could forward syslogs through NSClient++. And a lot of the plugins in the 0.4.2 version will be real-time plugins, meaning that if you get an error in your event log, that will be sent when it happens and not every 5 minutes when you're checking. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, you can check, or you can subscribe to changes to the file system, meaning that whenever the big file comes, you can send along the alert instead of checking every 5 minutes. So there is a lot of stuff in here for distributed monitoring. The thing, though, is that I don't use too much of this myself, so I don't really know what to do with it. It's just a lot of options again. So if anyone is interested, please let me know what you would actually want to do instead of what I think is cool, and we might get something useful. But essentially, they are an extension of the passive checks, which means that something can send event notification and something can receive event notification. And agents, actually, the agent term has been deprecated, so I should probably have changed the slide, can forward them to different servers, for instance, an NSCA server or something like that. It's also not a one-to-one mapping, which means that you can have multiple subscribers and multiple consumers. And of course, it supports routing. This is sort of the way that NSCA will be used in NSClient++ in the 0.4.0 version. But it means you can do a lot of stuff if you were so inclined to do. Python scripting is something I generally think is kind of cool for me, because for the first time ever, I've actually written unit tests. And that's a good thing, because it means things might not break in every new version. Essentially, Python scripting is very, very powerful. You have access to the entire API within NSClient++, so you can do the exact same thing that a DLL module can do. Of course, it requires Python, so you have to install Python on your Windows servers if you want to use it. But apart from that, it's just built in and works, and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. But as I said, the primary driver for me is that I'm doing all my unit testing with it, so I can actually test things, which is neat. So, the end of NSClient++. We're doing terrible on time, so I'll finish ahead of time. Talking too fast, or I was too lazy doing slides, not enough. So I've used this French little nice term here. Yeah, it means like, long live the king is dead, or maybe it's the other way around, something like that. Mort sounds like dead, so it's probably the other way around. Don't really speak French, I just like to name drop things, make people think I know stuff. And the reason for this is, of course, that the 0.4x version will be the last Windows agent. meaning that it will be able to run on Linux. It will be able to do a lot more than being a Windows agent. This, of course, doesn't really mean that it will change anything for you, because you can still use it as a Windows agent if you want to, but it's just that it will be able to do a lot more. So that brings me to the unfortunate questions slide 3 minutes ahead of time. That sucks. Oh yeah, I could do this, by the way. Have you seen the neat little logo there? Yeah, I did it yesterday because everyone else had them and I couldn't find the email with the template, so I had to invent something quickly. Yes, questions?
About the settings, with changing like NRP server to changing the section names in the ini files, will you make the old settings work as aliases?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I should have said that. Since you can have different settings subsystem, you can use old : which means that it will use your old file just fine.
Okay.
So if you don't change anything, you just install the new version, everything will work seamlessly. You won't notice it.
Thanks. I think
If
that
you're
was preying on a lot of people's minds.
If you're using check NT. But if you want to do like cool stuff, then you probably need to migrate the settings.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. No, I wrote a question, but then I wrote the answer to it as well, so it was already. Thank you. Awesome.
Efficient, yeah.
Oh, no. I found one more. I typed a lot. The monitoring kits that will they be like a set of services connected to each other, or a set of instances that you can? What I really want to know is, can you make one of those and then share it to other people? So
Yes.
you can just send out a configuration file with some module or something?
That's exactly. I can go into that since we have some time. The idea is that because of when you do like the internal scripting, which you can do in Lua or Python, then you can do a lot more, because you can access the settings of NSClient++. You can change the settings, and you can respond to command line programs and that kind of stuff, which means that you can have an installation phase where you go to the database, you figure out what data sources you have and that kind of stuff, create the configuration for it in NSClient++.ini, where you can configure the script. And another of these things is that the script is not one command, the script can be 500 commands. So the idea is essentially it's a sort of an advanced version of a script. But the idea is that you can configure it and it can be intelligent, which scripts tend to not be. So that's the main difference.
Thank you. That answers everything I had.
Awesome. So that's it? No questions? Good. No. It's that guy. Yeah. You have to wait.
Sorry.
Cutting the line. Yeah.
Apologize if I missed this, but in the newer versions, are you going to be able to do multiple NSCA scheduled times where you send passive checks out? Because right now, I believe the version I have, right? Okay.
You will.
Okay, thank you.
And that's sort of the reason why I need the settings, because then you'll need to be able to change individual checks commands, right? So how do I do that with the old setting structure? It doesn't really work out unless you want to have this long commands or something. Any other questions? We have like 15 minutes of questions. You need to bring them on.
We'll just talk slower.
Yeah, that could do that as well.
For the downloading of like INIs and stuff, how does that actually happen? Does it just go out when it starts up and downloads one, or does it actually have some intelligence to know when one changed and it needs to download a new one?
Let me answer that with a question. What would you like it to do?
Right thing?
Essentially, right now, what it will download the file and then cache it. So whenever it starts up, it will download the new file, and if it can't, it will use the old cached version.
Okay. So it just downloads it every time it starts up, whether it needs it or not.
But as I said, if anyone says, this is the way it should be done, it's very easy to change it. It's just that no one is using it right now, so I just added something to get people started.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you could maybe pass along a checksum when it goes to see if the file's there, to see if it could, I don't know.
Maybe. But question at the back almost.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about your check volumes versus a check drive, and then specifically on clustered drive or volumes.
Is this going to end up with I'm not fixed the volume support in this version either?
No. I'm just curious about what...
Well, essentially, the difference is that there is APIs in Windows to enumerate volumes, And there are APIs in Windows to enumerate drives. That's the difference. The actual check command does the exact same thing. It's just that instead of enumerating the drives, it will enumerate the actual volumes. And how that works in a clustered file system, I have no idea. But feel free to tell me. And if it doesn't work, I'll come here again next year and I'll say, yeah, I didn't fix it this version either. No more questions?
I have one, Michael.
Oh,
Where-
wait, before you start to wrap up, I need to have like a photo. Yeah, it's an old camera, so it's like 15 minutes to load the flash. And then it comes smoke out of the flash. That's Canon for you, it's awesome.
So
Yeah.
where can people go to contribute or donate to your project?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I missed the last slide, actually, yeah. Silly me. The slides are usually here in somewhere between 12 to 18 months. There usually is a lag before I have the time to add them. But they will be here eventually, I promise. Maybe. But anywhere, NSClient.org is the website where you can find anything. We have this cool Facebook page. I don't do anything with it. Yeah, I have some sort of RS thing going on which grabs the stuff from NSClient.org and posts it on Facebook. That's it. I sometimes actually go in and check when people write questions. It's happened 3 times now, I think. So that's it. But we have a Facebook page that's like modern, cool. I'm like hip with the kids at home, Yeah, I've had a LinkedIn page as well. Yeah, but that's maybe not so cool. Yeah. But I try. So does this mean people want to go out and have a beer or something, or maybe they had that yesterday and want to go out and not have a beer today? Anything? No? Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. We still have 11 more minutes to kill. Or otherwise they'll, deduct the part of my hotel fee, so I actually have to pay for the hotel room or something. That would be terrible.
Well, first, let me just say thanks, because we've made good use of your tool. My question is about documentation, and
I thought I
I've been
covered
to
it.
the wiki, and I've actually tried to help with some of that, but I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. So I guess my question is, enough to where I could add content, to explain it or whatever. I've done a few examples when I could, but so I guess my question is, when we can't figure out the new syntax based on the change log or something that you publish, how do we? I don't know how to ask this.
If you look in the change log, it sometimes says the changes. No, but I mean, I think that's probably I need to add then the new options, that kind of stuff. And if I don't, please tell me, because I'm really lazy. Especially when I'm coding something, then it can take like months before I even touch the wiki. But what I would probably like is how to actually use this, because I don't really have any Windows servers to monitor at home. I mean, I monitor a couple of desktops, but that's it. So I don't really use it in an enterprise fashion, which means that I have no clue what is actually sensible. So I think that's really what would help me the most, is people saying, this is the command I use to check this, or this is, the way to check this, or something like that. Also, of course, explaining what the various options actually do in a context. For instance, I mean, if you have a cluster, how does this turn out? But of course, I should update the actual, options and stuff. But not always. Sometimes. But feel free to bother me if I don't.
Okay.
I'll feel bad and do it.
Thanks.
I guess since we have an abundance of time, I'll ask not a stupid question, but I just recently have gotten into trying to go through event logs, and at least in the version, it's probably fairly old, the doing substring searches inside the actual event log description didn't seem to be working. Do you know if that's one of the things that it has been fixed?
That should absolutely work. One important thing, though, is that there is a flag called descriptions,
Right.
which you need to set.
That could very well be it.
And the reason for that is that the way the description works is that the event log message just contains the strings. So to be able to get the rendered message, what I need to do is I need to go to the register to figure out, okay, we have this 45 DLLs, which supplies messages for this one. Then I need to go and load each DLL and figure out, is there a message here? Then I need to load that message, and I need to apply the parameters, which is a very, very time-consuming task to do. So if you have, 45 million enters in your event log, you do not want to do that. So that's an important thing when you do the filtering. Put it in the right order so you don't do that first. Also, personally, to be honest, there's no reason to filter on messages. There is no reason to filter on messages, trust me. Because the messages is essentially just the event ID and event source plus the strings. The rest is just, the same value every time. So it's just for laziness, really, if you ask me. But I know a lot of people want to do it. But there is a flag called descriptions, if I remember correctly, which you need to set, or it will not be able to do so. Oh, no, we're getting started. Awesome.
Yeah, we actually use it quite extensively at my organization. I had a quick question on distributing the application to multiple servers at one shot. Have you been looking into doing like a bulk install?
Actually, most people in the Windows community, they have some sort of Windows platform for distributing applications, right? And the installer is a regular MSI installer, so it's very easy to do that, ish. I would like to add. There's always an ish. But the problem is, of course, the configuration. How do you get your configuration into the distribution? And the way, as I understand it, that most people do that is that they sort of edit the MSI file in their sort of packaging solution, and they do replace the configuration file and run that out. Another option, which for instance OP5 is doing, is that they have several configuration files in their sort of personal version of the installer. So that's another version where you can sort of tune and tweak which options to set where and that kind of thing. But in general, it is a normal MSI installer, so you can use whatever tool you're using today. If you don't have a tool, then there are a couple of sort of like workarounds. You can use PSExec to run remotely and distribute stuff that way, but usually it's more trouble than it's worth, to be honest.
The syslog interface that you showed earlier, is that actually something that actually works right now, or is that just a
Are we talking about the real-time stuff?
Yeah, where it could read the event logs and send them to syslog?
No, that's something that is scheduled for 042.
Oh.
Maybe I didn't mention that, but all of the real-time stuff will be with the new checking subsystem. I might add, though, that I was actually looking for it the other day, and it was like 5 lines of code, so I might add it just for fun.
Yeah, so we're kind of doing that right now by using some Perl scripts to take what we find out of the event log and then send it via syslog, but it's kind of a hack, but it works.
So we're done?
I think we're
Awesome.
done. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.